Every day for 9 years, a dog named Hachiko walked to Shibuya train station in Tokyo and waited for a man who was never coming back. His owner, a university professor named Hidesaburo Ueno, had died suddenly at work in 1925. Hachiko didn't know that. All he knew was the routine they'd built together, walking to the station every morning and waiting there every evening for the same train, the same platform, the same face in the crowd. So he kept showing up every single day. For 9 years, commuters started noticing him, then feeding him, then writing about him, until an entire nation knew his story. When he finally died in 1935, still waiting, Japan built a bronze statue of him at that exact spot. It's still there today, and it's one of the most photographed statues in Tokyo. 9 years, every single evening. That's not a coincidence, and it's not just a sad story about loyalty. Somewhere inside a dog's brain, something was tracking time, tracking absence, tracking the shape of a routine long after any ordinary logic would have given up on it. And once you start asking how, the science underneath that question turns out to be almost as moving as the story itself. Dogs don't have clocks. They have something better. Here's the obvious question. Dogs can't read a clock. They don't understand hours or minutes. So when your dog seems to know, with almost eerie precision, that you're late coming home, what is actually happening? The honest answer is that dogs aren't tracking time the way we do. They're tracking something else entirely. Something built out of scent, light, sound, and routine, layered together into a kind of internal rhythm that functions almost like a clock, without ever being one. Let's start with scent, because this is one of the strangest and most quietly beautiful pieces of the puzzle. Dog cognition researcher Alexandra Horowitz, who has spent much of her career studying how dogs actually experience the world, has pointed out that a dog's nose isn't just detecting whether a smell is present or absent. It's detecting concentration, how strong or faint a scent is, and scent, it turns out, fades at a fairly predictable rate. When you leave a room, your scent doesn't vanish instantly. It lingers, then gradually weakens, hour by hour, as molecules disperse and settle. A dog with a nose that can detect odors and concentrations of parts per trillion isn't just smelling that you were there. In a very real sense, it's smelling how long ago you were there. Some researchers describe this as a kind of olfactory timeline, the strength of your fading scent acting almost like sand falling through an hourglass, except the hourglass is the air in your living room, and the sand is you. The study that measured a dog's joy. Here's where the science gets genuinely fascinating, because researchers have actually tested whether dogs behave differently depending on how long their owner has been gone, and the results are hard to read without smiling a little. In a study conducted by researchers Therese Rehn and Rehn Keeling in Sweden, dogs were left alone for varying lengths of time, 30 minutes, 2 hours, and 4 hours, and then reunited with their owners while researchers carefully recorded their behavior. The dogs left alone longer didn't just seem happier to see their owners. They showed measurably more intense greeting behavior, more tail wagging, more physical contact, more sustained excitement, scaling up the longer the separation lasted. That detail matters more than it might seem at first. It means a dog's greeting isn't just a fixed, automatic reflex triggered by the sight of your face. It's responsive to something the dog is tracking internally, some accumulating sense of how much time has actually passed, even without a single clock, calendar, or wristwatch anywhere in the house. The biology of missing someone. Now here's where the story stops being just clever cognition and starts becoming something closer to genuine emotional attachment, because there's real biology behind it. In 2015, a team led by Japanese researcher Takefumi Kikusui published a study in the journal Science that has become one of the most talked about pieces of research in the entire field of human-animal bonding. The team found that when dogs and their owners gaze into each other's eyes, both species experience a rise in oxytocin, the same hormone responsible for bonding between human parents and infants. It doesn't stop there. That oxytocin rise in the owner makes them gaze back more, which raises the dog's oxytocin further, which makes the dog gaze back even more, creating what researchers call a positive feedback loop of connection, running in both directions between two completely different species. This is a big deal, because it means the bond a dog forms with you isn't some rough animal approximation of affection. It's built on some of the exact same neurochemical machinery that bonds a human parent to a child. When your dog seems overjoyed to see you, chemically, physiologically, something remarkably similar to what happens between a parent and a returning child is happening inside that dog's brain and yours at the same time, together. Circadian rhythms, the body's hidden metronome. Scent and hormones aren't the whole story either. Dogs, like nearly every animal on Earth, have an internal circadian rhythm, a roughly 24-hour biological clock governed by light exposure, feeding schedules, and consistent daily patterns. This is why a dog can seem to magically know it's almost dinner time or start waiting by the door minutes before you usually walk through it, even on days when your schedule shifts slightly. Researchers studying canine behavior have found that dogs build astonishingly precise associative timelines around repeated daily events. The sound of a particular car engine in the distance, the specific quality of afternoon light through a window, the neighbor's routine that happens to overlap with yours, all of it gets quietly stitched together into a predictive model of when you're supposed to come home. Dogs aren't checking a clock. They're running a kind of pattern recognition engine built from thousands of small repeated cues that gets eerily accurate the longer you live together. Greyfriars Bobby and the pattern that keeps showing up. Hachiko wasn't a one-off. Nearly a century earlier and thousands of miles away, in Edinburgh, Scotland, a Skye Terrier named Bobby became famous for spending 14 years guarding the grave of his owner, a night watchman named John Gray, in Greyfriars Kirkyard. Local residents began feeding him. A nearby restaurant reportedly kept a standing arrangement to give him a meal every day at exactly 1 o'clock, and Bobby, without fail, stopped visiting the grave right around that same hour to go eat before returning. When he eventually died, he was given the rare honor of burial near his owner, and a statue of him stands in Edinburgh to this day, still visited by tourists who leave sticks at its base. 2 different dogs, 2 different centuries, 2 different continents, and almost the exact same story. That's not coincidence. That's a real measurable capacity built into the canine brain for tracking time, tracking absence, and tracking the emotional weight of a bond that doesn't fade just because the person attached to it is gone. Here's the part that tends to land differently once you know all of this. Your dog isn't just sitting by the door, out of boredom while you're at the grocery store or stuck in a meeting. Somewhere in that brain, scent is fading on a predictable curve. An internal 24-hour rhythm is quietly ticking forward, and a nervous system wired for attachment is tracking the growing gap between now and the last time your voice was in the room. This is also worth saying clearly why prolonged absences can genuinely be hard on dogs, not just inconvenient. Veterinary behaviorists have documented real physiological stress responses, including elevated cortisol, in dogs left alone for extended periods, particularly dogs with strong attachment bonds to their owners. The flip side of a bond capable of producing Hachiko-level loyalty is a nervous system that can also genuinely suffer in prolonged absence. The same wiring that makes the reunion so joyful is the wiring that makes the wait hard. The technology now watching all of this happen. This whole area of research has accelerated dramatically in the last decade, mostly because of a very unglamorous piece of technology, the home pet camera. Companies building AI-powered pet monitors are now collecting enormous data sets on exactly how dogs behave across the hours their owners are away, when they pace, when they settle, when they position themselves near the door or a favorite window. And researchers are starting to mine this data for patterns that would have been nearly impossible to study systematically before smartphones and cheap cameras existed. Some of the more recent research frontiers are genuinely exciting. Wearable biometric collars, similar in concept to a human fitness tracker, are now being used in canine cognition studies to measure heart rate variability and activity patterns throughout a dog's day alone, giving researchers a far more precise picture of stress and anticipation building in real time as a familiar homecoming hour approaches. Some labs are even exploring whether trained scent detection protocols could eventually be used therapeutically, helping sheltered dogs and rescue dogs with severe separation anxiety by gradually recalibrating how they process an owner's fading scent, essentially retraining the dog's internal hourglass to feel less alarming as it runs down. Here's a detail worth sitting with as this closes. It would be easy to hear all of this and feel a little guilty every time you leave the house. That's not really the point. The point is that this entire elaborate system, the fading set, the internal clock, the oxytocin loop, the pattern recognition running quietly in the background of a dog's mind all day, exists for exactly one reason. It exists because dogs evolved over tens of thousands of years living alongside humans to care deeply and specifically about us coming back. Hachiko's 9 years at that station weren't a malfunction. They were the clearest possible expression of a bond so deeply wired into the biology of the animal that not even death could immediately unwind it. Every single dog waiting by a door somewhere right now, tracking a fading scent, listening for a particular engine sound, feeling that internal clock quietly tick toward an hour it has learned to associate with joy, is running a smaller, quieter version of that exact same story. The story isn't really about time at all. It's about how thoroughly and how biologically a dog commits to loving you back.